After a lifetime of feeling distinctively different, writer Clem Bastow finally felt a sense of clarity when her consulting psychologist diagnosed her with autism spectrum disorder at the age of 36. Clem, welcome to Afternoons.
Hello, Joe.
But now tell me this, what was it about your diagnosis that just gave you that sense of aha?
Oh, look, it was this kind of series of questions that I had throughout my life. Why are some things really easy, or why am I really good at certain things, and why are other things such a challenge that they don't seem to be for other people? So socialising, you could argue it is difficult for everyone. For me, it was terrifying. Dating was really difficult. If I was there's a library at my university which has really stripy carpet and lots of mirrors, I would feel like I was going to fall over as soon as I walked into it. But funnily enough, it was, I work as a screenwriter as well, and over the past 6 or so years that I've been working in that field, certain skills have improved at the rate that you would expect them to.
In terms of humour and
plot,
story,
that kind of stuff. But then the character stuff, it would be very funny on a sort of surface level, and then my script editors or the assessors would say, we're not really sure, what's going on with this character. Can you tell us a bit about their emotional, what's happening underneath? And I would just stare at them and think, I don't know.
So you genuinely couldn't explain why this character would do that?
It was very hard to articulate.
What was the signs that you started to feel that there's something a bit different? Just can't put my finger on it.
Yeah, totally. And I think what it was that I hadn't realised, because you wouldn't know from the media, typically in TV shows, films, autistic people are usually men, they usually have a very specific kind of presentation. And so when I started to read a bit about how it presented in girls and women, I was like, that's me, tick, 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 tick. And then I had a few autistic friends who had their suspicions about me and encouraged me to take that plunge. So it was a very interesting process.
Well, joining us also is Natasha Staheli. Natasha is from Yellow Ladybugs, a community group dedicated to the support of autistic girls and women. Welcome, Natasha. Now, is Clem's story familiar among a lot of the women you support in terms of finding out later on?
Very, very familiar. We've heard the story hundreds of times. It's far more prevalent than you'd realise.
So where are we missing this? Is it missing a diagnosis or misdiagnosing it? Is it because the standards that have been set are kind of weighted towards finding it more in men than in girls and women?
Yeah, you have misdiagnosis, you have girls and women being missed, you have them being misunderstood, all three. So we think that, girls present differently, women present differently. They don't fit the stereotypical autistic male profile that we understand. And I think for a lot of young girls going in for a diagnosis process, they get dismissed because they're chatty, they make eye contact.
Right.
Verbal.
What's stereotypically known to be, ASD for short, autistic spectrum disorder, that sort of stereotypical stuff does not necessarily present itself in...
No, and even things like, you think of the typical little boy who's interested in train timetables or something like that.
Right.
And the little girl who comes in, she loves Disney princesses or My Little Pony, so it seems typical, but it's underneath it when you start digging, you realise that there are other things going on. But the diagnostic process itself, we think, is weighted towards boys. The criteria have been written around a male understanding of autism. So
is it changing though now?
I think when you look at the diagnostic criteria, not at this stage, unfortunately, no. I think there is a growing understanding, and this is something we push for in Yellow Ladybugs, that professionals, that psychologists, the paediatricians, the GPs need to have a better understanding of autistic girls and women and how they might present, but we've still got a long way to go in terms of the way the diagnosis process works.
Clem, for you, when you were sort of in your younger years, what are some of the things that you wish you kind of, now that you have been diagnosed, what are some of the things that you wish more people were aware of?
In terms of the way I existed in the world,
in terms of anyone who's listening who might be feeling the similar feelings that you're having.
Yeah, I think I just felt very weird, and that's really hard when childhood and especially the teenage years are difficult at the best of times. For what we would call a neurotypical person, it's still very stressful. You're dealing with those social changes.
Pardon my ignorance, but when you say neurotypical person, what do you mean?
So we say neurodiverse to mean autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, neurological conditions where the brain is just wired differently.
Right.
So a neurotypical person, you could say normal, inverted commas, even though what's normal.
Yep, sure,
but yes.
sure.
So someone who's not geared that way neurologically. But, I think for me, there was always this question of I felt like an outcast and I wasn't sure why, and I didn't really understand, one of the things that is common with girls on the autism spectrum disorder is that they want friends, they really,
right.
So that idea of the kind of lone wolf boy who's happy to look at his, computer parts for hours and hours, for the girls there is a real desire to connect socially, but it's
right.
the lack of understanding that's really hard, and that exists to this day. But I think with girls, because we're socialised to be chatty, that old sugar and spice and everything nice, you do get a little bit better at it. But I think what people don't realise is that it's so learned. So
right.
much work has gone into seeming like a
chatty
normal,
and lovely.
chatty person.
Yeah, right.
And then
not knowing that behind the scenes there's a lot of insecurities, trepidation about being in the public.
And also exhaustion. A lot of people on the spectrum experience anxiety, they experience depression, and a lot of the time that's because the world is not designed with autistic people in mind. So even something as simple as catching a tram, going to work can be a very, very tiring experience. So you have this sort of what we call a social hangover. So I can go to the networking drinks for work, nail it, be very up, and the next day, no, I'm at home in my pajamas.
So how is something like your organisation helping people like Clem?
Helping young Clem.
Younger Clem.
Yeah, look,
sure.
we our primary purpose is to run events for autistic girls, and behind that, what we're looking at is connecting the tribe of autistic girls and women. That's really at the heart of what we're about, and bringing girls together so they don't feel weird, they don't feel alone, they feel understood, they're with their tribe, and that of course extends through to women as well. And we would love to be doing more stuff for women. At this stage, we certainly advocate actively. We've been involved, along with the Mays and other organisations, in lobbying the Victorian government to deliver on a state autism plan, and we've got a particular interest in the recommendations around supporting girls and women with autism. So we push very hard in that sort of area, and we'll keep doing so. But yeah, beyond that, we're just about connection. We're about celebrating autism, and we talk about shining a positive light and making these girls feel proud of who they are, and helping them become self-advocates. And look, we would love to see that transfer as our girls grow up and become teens and women, that they have that strength and that sense of belonging.
You're listening to ABC Radio. I'm Dilruk Jaisinger, and I'm joined by writer Clem Bastow and psychologist Natasha Stahelli from...
I'm not a psychologist.
So what should we declare you as then, Natasha?
Look, I'm part of Yellow Ladybugs. I'm a mum of a daughter with autism.
Right.
Yeah, I can't claim to be a psychologist.
You're talking to Clem Bastow and mum legend Natasha Stahelli from Yellow Ladybugs, which is a community group. Yellow Ladybugs is a group that's dedicated to support autistic girls and women. Clem, you talked about how stereotypically in the media, in terms of movies and TV shows, that we don't see the way we see people with autistic disorder is tends to be male. Do you feel like now, as a scriptwriter, here's an opportunity for you to create a character?
One step ahead of you.
So what can we expect in the future?
I am working on something that does involve autism, but I think there have been some great examples. The Temple Grandin movie with Claire Danes is, I think, perfect.
Because I was going to say, genuinely, I consider myself a little bit of a movie buff, and I was racking my brain, and I couldn't think of an autistic female character. There's not a lot.
It's one of those things. It's a bit like being in any minority group. Sometimes you just kind of are like, I'm going to choose decide that character is autistic.
Right.
But there have been, I think, the character on Bones that Emily Deschanel plays, I think, was it The Bridge? One of the Scandi noirs, but
never quite explicitly.
No, not really. It's always just sort of implied. And funnily enough, I think a lot of the time they might be female characters, but the kind of presentation is a little bit more like what we would expect from men. So in terms of the female presentation, I think that's not really been explored so much. But I know that there is now an autistic character on Sesame Street who's a girl.
Really?
Yeah, one of the Muppets. So there is steps being made in the right direction, which I think is good. And also this year, a number of high-profile women who have revealed their diagnosis as well. So that's good.
Who are some of those women who have?
Hannah Gadsby, Anne Hegarty from The Chase.
From The Chase, who plays the governess.
Yeah.
It must feel like such almost a relief of a sense, like, again, I'm pretty obsessed with the word identity, especially this particular episode. We talked a lot about what the sense of identity is, and then when you feel a little bit more lost as to who you are and why you behave in a certain way that other people are calling quote-unquote weird. But you do, to say this one particular sentence I really loved, I think you know which one I'm talking about never forget it, if you met an autistic person, remember that.
Yeah, you've met one autistic person. And that's the thing, everybody's different. So for me, I love loud sounds. The Sideshow Alley at the Royal Show, fantastic. I love very, very abrasive heavy metal, and so I will often gravitate towards events at arts festivals that I know many of my autistic friends would find unbearable, but for me it's the little sounds. It's somebody picking their nails on the tram. I'll get off the tram.
Really?
Yep.
So if they... I was about to do it. Instinctively, I was just like, let's just put this to the test and see how... No, but so if someone's picking at their nails...
So small sounds are very apparent to me. I was talking to my housemates the other day about how I knew that there was a caterpillar. We have a lot of indoor plants, and I was like, I'm trying to find this caterpillar. I can hear it eating, and they couldn't believe it. And then I found 2 caterpillars in our ferns.
Oh my god! So do you sometimes worry about telling your mates this because they might just use it to bug you? Yes. Because now I'm thinking, look, I've got the nails on her. Now if ever at any point in this interview, Natasha, if it gets too annoying, we know what we can do.
Exactly.
Natasha, just to wrap up though, what is it that people who are listening who might be going through something like this, what is the sort of actions that they can take in trying to seek that help?
Okay, we're a big fan of diagnosis. We say don't be afraid of it. If you've got a child you're worried about, if it's yourself, there are people out there who can help. There are professionals who do understand girls. Yellow Ladybugs, people come to us for recommendations and go through that process, and if you come out with a diagnosis, then first and foremost connect with the autistic community because they are your people and they understand better than anyone and they give you a sense of belonging. Come to the Yellow Ladybugs, come to our events, and in terms of the support, because autism is a disability, there are, disabling aspects to it.
Are we moving in the right direction in terms of like the stigma and the misinformation about it? Because when I think about growing up in Sri Lanka, I was there 19 years and I don't think I heard the word autism even mentioned once. Maybe because we spoke Sinhalese, but still, nonetheless, there was probably way to go about it. But on a serious note, though, I feel like there was so many people in my school. I went to an all-boys school with like 4,000 students, and I now in hindsight, I go, oh, that's what was happening there. Do you feel we're at least starting to make some big changes?
I think we're making a good start. There is still a long way to go. And I was saying to Clem before we came in that I live in a bubble of acceptance where there is no stigma.
Right.
And that's amazing. That's a wonderful thing. But you then step out in the real world and people are afraid of the label.
Right.
They still, the misperceptions about autism that are out there still dominate the negative, tragic, burden side of things, which is helping nobody.
How does stories like Clem help?
I think they help because people see someone who says, I'm autistic. And
I think I've done okay.
And I'm doing okay,
But I also think it's important, it's very easy to go, oh, well, it's easy for you, So I think I'm increasingly talking about some of the challenges as well. Yeah. And I think... I know people like to say things like, aren't we all a little bit on the spectrum? But and they're meant in support. But I think what's useful to remember is the spectrum begins and ends with autism. So you can't. It's a bit like being pregnant. You can't be a little bit pregnant. You're pregnant. So I think that's important for people to remember that it's not. We're getting better at catching it. So it does feel like there are more people who are autistic, but the temptation is to say that it's, social contagion or there's an epidemic in inverted commas.
Right.
I think it's just that a lot of people have slipped through the net previously.
Well, we can't manage what we can't measure.
Yeah.
So if we finally start to understand, perhaps at least that's the starting point, then you can navigate it better.
Yeah, I think so too. But I think, like Natasha was saying, there is still a little bit of reticence around saying the word autism, and so I could identify as, Aspie or whatever. I don't think there's anything wrong with being autistic. I'm very proud to say I'm an autistic person. I think that is really helpful. You know, the autistic self-advocacy, which is becoming more and more of a thing. I think, you know, maybe 10, 20 years ago, it was predominantly professionals talking about autistic people. We now have autistic advocates who are able to speak on their own behalf and on behalf of the community as well, working in collaboration with amazing organisations like Yellow Ladybugs.